And the plan for this evening, because there will probably be a few more people this evening than this morning. So we'll do a little summary overview, have them experience that very nice video recording of the rainy season. And then the plan is I'll tell another story about the rainy season, a pastime with Radha and Krishna in the rainy season. Something that's not part of Light of the Bhagavad, but connected to the rainy season and Radha Krishna. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Can you turn the volume up a little bit? Just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so chapter 41. The floodgates are open. Prabhupada is going to bring Krishna front and center, not a little bit, but completely. So he's going to speak now, or write, about the birth of Krishna. Right in chapter 20 of Light of the Bhagavad. It's not moving. Help. It's not moving. There we go. Can you see the screen clearly? I mean, from this angle, I can't. Okay. There we go. In the clear sky of autumn, the beautiful moon among the beautiful stars becomes the cynosure of all eyes, just as Lord Sri Krishna is the central attraction in the Vrishni dynasty or in the family of Yadu. Now, people in Japan aren't going to know anything about this, but that's okay. Prabhupada is going to introduce. Sri Krishna appeared in the family of Yadu. And since the Yadu dynasty, since then, the Yadu dynasty has been luminous like the moon in autumn. I mean, this is one of Queen Kunti's messages. One of the reasons for Krishna's appearance was to bring notoriety and fame to Yadu, because he appeared in the Yadu dynasty for the purpose of hearing Yadu dynasty. The appearance and disappearance of the Lord are similar to the appearance and disappearance of the sun. Remembering that the people who are his audience have probably never heard about the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Person. So he's helping them get a picture by the appearance and disappearance of the sun, likening it. The appearance of Godhead in some particular family does not mean that he is limited by obligations to that family. He is fully independent and may appear and disappear anywhere and everywhere, because here comes a curveball, because he is all-pervading. So the personal conception and the all-pervading conception it's also new. Vishnu is the all-pervading super soul. And Krishna is the source of super soul. And super soul expands from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, from whom Brahma comes, and then the whole universe is created. So he's moving forward quickly, isn't he? Since God is all-pervading, like the power of electricity, he can manifest himself at any place within his creation. When Krishna is within, We cannot see him. But when Krishna is without, he is seen by everyone, although very few know him as he is. Now, his Bhaktivedanta purports in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Srimad Bhagavatam itself give expanded explanations and explanations and explanations. Here's just little messages of transcendence about different features. So far, it's the Bhagavan feature and the Paramatma feature. Everyone sees the sun every day, but that does not mean that everyone knows what the sun actually is. Similarly, knowing Krishna. Similarly, when Lord Sri Krishna was present 5,000 years ago, very few could know what he was. Then he quotes from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. I mean, the painting is illustrating something other in one of the Bhagavatam pastimes, but the Krishna is the super soul, and when the soul leaves, the super soul leaves, and understanding the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities is an important message. So he's including it in light of the Bhagavad. Whoops, there's the painting. I'm sorry, didn't show you the painting. Who knows the story behind the painting? Suyagya, right? Suyagya. It's a description that Hiranyakashipu was giving to his relatives about, don't lament, because the queens were lamenting, and then several other things happened. That's where that painting comes from. But then there's Krishna. Okay. Again, on the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Those fellows at the bottom, they're the Maya Parita Jnana folks. They're scholars looking at Bhagavad Gita and finding objections because they don't understand the transcendental nature of Krishna and his supreme dominion. So this is the conclusion of this chapter. There are foolish persons who take him, that's Krishna, to be an ordinary man, not knowing the essence of his transcendental features. Now, so much could be said to expand on this. I can say, I think I should start saying a few things rather than just reading the text. But I like appreciating how Prabhupada is bringing these topics up without elaborate explanation, and somehow the reader thus far has been elevated to understand, or at least conceive of, transcendence and the method of conceiving of transcendence. And now he's presenting transcendence, the transcendental personality of Godhead. So here's a caution. Don't see he who is transcendental to be non-transcendental, because then we won't understand him. So to understand him, what is the nature of transcendence for a person that doesn't know transcendence? It's definition by negation. but it's not yet understanding positive. Definition by negation means like this: he's not one of us. So not one, because we can't be a person and all pervasive, supreme person, under whom everything rests. It's and is emanating from him, etc., etc. So I like just appreciating how Prabhupada is introducing a new understanding, wishes to carry his reader, but not, because it's a small book. It's not, 12 cantos Srimad Bhagavatam, or even 3 volumes first canto. It's just a little book. So he can't say everything. Nonetheless, he's presenting principles. Then, at least for a thoughtful reader, it would invite questions. How to understand this? What does that mean? Just stepping back a little bit. While Prabhupada was writing this book, little book, simultaneously, Prabhupada was working on Canto 1, Part 1, which was also printed in 1962, and Part 2, 63, Part 2 and 63, Canto 1, Part 3 and 64. So while he's presenting, it's nice to appreciate what's going on. While Prabhupada was writing these volumes, what was he doing that for? It was a preparation for Mission Impossible, taking the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the West, the English-speaking parts of the world. So he understood that to do that, there had to be something substantial. And a little appreciation, I mentioned this before, but I'll repeat it. He's just following Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. How do we understand that? In this particular way, Bhaktisiddhanta, I mentioned, wanted very much to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement outside of India. And he could have personally gone, but what he did instead was he had 2 of his leading sannyasi disciples go, and he was championing their work. And championing means big production for them to go. All of the 64 Gaudiya Mas were requested to make some contribution financially to finance these 2 sannyasis going. There's some amazing photographs. It's off in the middle of a field. Bhaktisiddhanta made a big arch. And there was a procession through the arch in the middle of a field as they're marching off to go to the West. I mean, he made a big festival involved. However, it was delayed before they left, before this big festival happened, because Bhaktisiddhanta wanted a book to introduce to people in England in English who was Lord Chaitanya. You probably know the history. And he had assigned that service of writing this book, then ended up in printed form about that thick. Sri Krishna Chaitanya. That was the title of the book. Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And Professor Sanyal, I mentioned this, from the professor at the university in Orissa, was given the assignment, and Bhaktisiddhanta trusted him. In fact, it said that sometimes Professor Sanyal would write something and it would go under the name of Bhaktisiddhanta and vice versa. They were that close in terms of regard for their ability to write and express Lord Chaitanya's message. So he waited and waited, and it took some time because he wanted like a super duper Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who is Lord Chaitanya, to go with the sannyasis to introduce the message of Lord Chaitanya. So who is he and what's his message? Bhaktivinoda Thakur did something similar prior. That's a little skinny book, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts. Correct? You're familiar with the history? Anyone not familiar with that history? The very year that Prabhupada was born, 1896, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote in English and published at his own expense an 86-page book, little book, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts, and sent it around the world. Because he, while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wasn't even so well known in India, he wanted the world to know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Radha Shama Sundara. So the method was the Brihat Mridanga, the printing press. And so it was printed. I've seen a copy. It was the copy I saw was the original kind of, it's called an offset printing. Like a big plate would come stamping down on the page and then another page and stamp. So that the letters were irregular. They weren't lined up straight. But he had to work with what he had. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur did, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did, and Prabhupada is following. And to give Lord Chaitanya's message, a principal medium, classical medium, is books. Now, before there were printing, because printing was just starting at Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, before that they were just handwritten. Books had to be hand copied, one by one by one. So there wasn't a big book distribution program, except for brahmanas that would very meticulously copy by hand a book, the writings of the 6 Goswamis, for example, during Jiva Goswami's time. Anyway, it's a medium or the medium, the principal medium to pass on teachings is books. And it still is. We had that discussion yesterday. Now there's, recordings and so forth, but books are most essential. What's in Prabhupada's books is weight-wise is more important because he wanted to say exactly and saw it, the editing of the transcriptions, before it was published. So anyway, Prabhupada followed the same. So while he's preparing Srimad Bhagavatam for his mission to the English-speaking parts of the world, simultaneously he's writing in 4 months this little book. And this little book is just a capsule for a particular audience while he's preparing, the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And very determined and very capable. So how to present this to different audiences when they really don't know who is Krishna and the Supreme Person taking birth, and at the same time he's all pervasive, and it's kind of mind-bending. But he's giving little examples to help understand, like the sun rises and sets, it doesn't come into being and go out of being. So Krishna's appearance and disappearance. He doesn't elaborate on the all-pervasive feature of Vishnu. He's just indicating, and the person's interested can then read his Bhagavatam, Canto 1, in 3 parts. At least those that can read English. It's nice to picture our founder Acharya sitting in that little room, broadcasting to the world Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the foundation of Lord Chaitanya's message. Having also Professor Sanyal's Sri Krishna Chaitanya, but what Prabhupada did, in his own words, shortly after he reached America, he began working on teaching to Lord Chaitanya. I remember. It was, forget the year, something like 1960. Right? 1960. Whatever the year was, 1960, I think. No, 1970. You know, the Bhagavad, he wanted to translate the whole Bhagavatam, and it was a time out to give the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which is a summary of Chaitanya Charitamrita. The teaching portion, the 5 main teaching portions, and that's what he wrote. So I'm mentioning this because shortly in this section this morning, Prabhupada is going to start going into Vedic cosmology. And some of that is 5th canto Bhagavatam, but he's just touching on it. It's, I guess, if the audience hasn't been closed the book yet, they're going to understand this person is very wise and understands lots of things that we don't understand. I want to learn more from this person. And I want to read his Srimad Bhagavatam. So let's go on. Chapter 42. Wow, he's going into service and separation. Vipralambha Bhav. Wow. At night, what happened? Okay, the whole thing. At night, in autumn, the atmosphere is pleasant because it is neither very hot nor very cold. Now notice what the painting is. This is one of the original paintings of the celebrated artist lady in mainland China, under Tamal Krishna Maharaj's guidance, making a painting of the gopis in the mood of separation. The mild wind blowing through the gardens of fruits and flowers in Vrindavan appeared very much pleasing to all, all but the gopis, who were always overtaken by heartfelt sorrow in the absence of Krishna. So while introducing the personality Godhead as an appearance and disappearance, now comes the relationship of love in separation. He's really going up. According to authorities in the disciplic line, Viraha worship is more palatable than Sambhoga worship, and he doesn't really go into it too much, what that means. He drops the terms. I mean, there's a little bit. So Sambhoga, for those in the room that don't know what that means, it's love where there's a meeting between lover and beloved, Sambhoga. And Viraha is a loving relationship where there's a feeling of love in separation from the object, the beloved. So he's introducing this idea that love, devotion to the Supreme in a mood of separation is more palatable than love in meeting. So here we go, life's ultimate goal. This is from that same painting. This is gopis looking towards Krishna in a loving mood. And another nice painting Krishna playing upon his flute. This is that same painting that this other was on the periphery of what you see on the screen right now. Krishna is attracting the hearts and the minds of the gopis. Now, you can't see what's behind that white box, but I'll tell you what's behind that white box. In my version, what I'm going to show next time I show this, it shows it's a girl feeling separation from her beloved. And that the text from the artist that drew this is the autumn season, there's some leaves falling. Time seems to crawl when you miss the one you love, I miss you. That's what it says beneath that text. So here's what it says on top of that text. In the mundane world, there is also some shadow of such viraha, but there is no lasting reality to such relationships in the material world. He's just dropping drops, but you know that there's temporary and there's eternal, and the temporary is a reflection of the eternal, but it's not permanent. So that feeling of missing someone, that the object of one's love, it's a reflection of the spiritual, but it's not lasting. Time moves and things change and so forth and so on. Nothing permanent here. We must first activate our dormant love of Godhead by following the prescribed rules and by following in the footsteps of the authorities who are fixed in love of Godhead. I mean, Prabhupada's bold. Definitely. If we practice the viraha mode of worship, we can transcendentally realize the presence of the Lord more lovingly than in his presence. More lovingly than in his presence. So the painting, of course, is the gopis feeling separation from Krishna, absorbed. There's this nice statement by one of our acharyas. Krishna is considering.
Tomorrow's lecture.
Prior to leaving Vrindavan, Krishna is considering. Whenever I see Radha, she sees only one of me.
In a quarter mile, continue straight.
But when she doesn't see me, she sees me everywhere. So the happiness Radha will feel in separation will be even greater, many, many, many times greater. So let me give happiness to Radha by being absent for some time.
Straight, stay on US 206 South.
As one of the considerations, not the only, but one of the considerations.
Continues for 3 miles.
So, concisely, he is speaking of practicing the viraha mode of worship. To practice that, there has to be some attachment to the object. How do you practice separation if there isn't attachment to the object? So that comes first. But then a more mature stage, and here he's introducing a completely new audience to this kind of love of the residents of Vrindavan. A bona fide lover of God can never forget Krishna, even in exchange for everything else. Beautiful painting. That's the end of chapter 42. Now it's going to be interesting to hear what you all say. I found this was very beneficial for my bhakti practice, and something that can help me explain things to others about bhakti life. Okay, this next chapter may be more in this category. Perseverance in achieving the highest destination. In the autumn season, all the birds, beasts, and men become sexually disposed, and the bull, the stag, the male bird, the man, and other male creatures forcibly impregnate the fair sex. A similar impregnation takes place as a result of devotional service to the Lord. Wow. So there's the autumn season, the river is flowing, you see the nice waves, and depicting the season. Now let's see how Prabhupada takes this metaphor. Devotional service to the Lord never goes in vain. So showing children getting trained in Krishna consciousness in Gurukula, most likely. Just at the right moment, the results of one's particular devotional service will come, even if one has no desire for it. Now, what does that mean? Just at the right moment, the result of one's particular devotional service will come, even if one has no desire for it. So it's not mechanical, but it's natural. And if one takes up the process of devotional service, even if it's not expected, the result will come. The result will come because Krishna is reciprocating with the performer of bhakti. Here's our fellow with a spirit soul inside. But don't worry, I moved over the spirit soul to his more closer to his left shoulder in my version because we got that feedback. Devotees do not make business exchanges with the Lord, but the Lord, out of his own accord, fulfills all the desires of the devotees. This is a nice painting where Arjuna has won the hand of Draupadi, and they call out to Queen Kunti, their mother, guess what? Some wonderful thing has come to us. Very good. You just share it amongst yourselves. And then they bring Draupadi inside and she's like, what? Wait a minute. But mother said, so they have to follow what mother said. But how do they follow what mother said? Because where's the precedent for 5 men marrying 1 woman? So they went to Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva said, no problem. This was arranged before Draupadi's birth from her previous life. Lord Shiva indicated 5 times that she would be married to men. So it's already stated by Lord Shiva, therefore it should be done. On Vyasadev's say so, 1 woman was married to 5 men. So who knows how this, the desires of these 5 powerful brothers married 1 woman. Not like, hey, let's get together and marry 1 woman, but the fulfilling of the desire for their becoming married in a religious way that was fulfilled. Another painting. How are we going to fulfill what Queen Kunti said? One must have good faith in the regulative principles followed by the self-realized souls, and one should not be doubtful about the ultimate result of such devotional service. Now, the reader hasn't read Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to know what regulative principles are being talked about. It's all new, but it's establishing a principle. A devotee, therefore, should execute his devotional services. We give 6 points: with full energy, endurance, and confidence. He should perform his scheduled duties. He should be pure in heart, and he should serve in association with devotees. All 6 of these items will lead the devotee to the path of success. So there's a practical application item for anyone, like to remember that this isn't where he drew these 6 from. I don't know, probably from somewhere. He didn't just pull them out of the air, but wherever they came from, it's nice principles. We'll read the 6 again. Full energy, endurance, and confidence. Maybe it's utsaha nishchaya daryat. He should perform his scheduled duties, tat karma pravartanat. He should be pure in heart, and he should serve in association with devotees. Shadbir bhakti or prasiddhati. We should not consider going back to Godhead a casual notion. We must take it seriously, as enjoined in the scriptures. Here's a cartoon. Chanting japa, sitting in a lounge chair, changing the channel on the television. What was the 11th offense? And also to be inattentive while chanting. Okay, that's it for chapter 43. Now Prabhupada is going to go again to leadership and training of a proper leader. A well-trained prince versus many corrupt dacoits. Prabhupada wasn't a big fan of democracy. In the autumn season, all the reservoirs of water are full of lotus flowers. So we heard that in some parts of the world, like in Wuhan, it's a different season. But that's okay. There are also flowers that resemble the lotus, but are of a different class. What's that? Among them is a flower called kumuda. What's a kumuda? It's a water lily that may look like lotus, but it's not. It grows in the water from the mud, but it's different. How is it different? When the sun rises, all the flowers but the kumuda blossom beautifully. Similarly, lotus-like men take pleasure in the advent of a responsible king. But men who are like the kumuda do not like the existence of a king. That's the democratic group or democracy group. They don't like. Prabhupada is taking the boxing gloves off, and he's got his bare fist, and he's stating what may not be very popular in Japan. But there's nice images of lotuses. I hope you like these nice paintings. They're very wonderful. And I'm going to add to the presentation earlier this nice poem in Chinese about lotuses. So here's the kumuda. That's the water lily. So the distinction is the water lily doesn't open in the presence of the sun, whereas the lotus opens in the presence of the sun. Have you seen? I've seen. At night, the lotus closes. When the sun sets, the lotus closes. And when the sun rises in the morning, the lotus opens all day long. And when the night comes, the lotus closes. Now, I haven't observed water lilies and how they behave with the presence of the sun, but according to this verse, it's different. In a monarchy, one man sufficiently trained was competent enough to conduct alone the business of the state. Looks like a powerful guy. So Prabhupada preferred monarchy. And, there's examples of monarchs in Vedic culture, properly trained. Now, we know a little bit of the Western history of how monarchy went down. But, you could say it's the advancement of the age of Kali, or the increasing of ignorance. That's the advancement of Kali. But the monarch became decadent, and the monarchs buddied up with the church, the Catholic Church. This is in European history. And the Catholic Church, or the bishops, also became decadent. So that it was, the good plan became a bad plan. So they gave it up and switched over to democracy from monarchy. So kings were trained by qualified brahmanas. This is the qualified brahmana Narada giving instructions to the qualified king Yudhisthira in the presence of Krishna. It's a Rajasuya Yagya event after in Canto 7. Nice painting. In a so-called democratic government, corruption is even more rampant than in any autocracy or monarchy. Now, that's not very popular in some parts of the world. There's fans of democracy, but, Prabhupada had a different idea. So back to the metaphor of the lotus, men who want to flourish in the guise of servants of the people do not want a good king at the head of the state. No, they didn't want a corrupt king either, but the good king. They are like the kumuda flowers, which do not take pleasure in the sunshine. Anyway, Prabhupada is making his statement. Another nice lotus flower. Ku means bad, and mud. Ku, mudda. Mud means pleasure. Persons who want to exploit administrative power for their own self-interest do not like the presence of a good king. Now, this is ideal, just making a social comment. This is Kali Yuga. Where's the ideal king? Where's the person to train the ideal king? Where's the person of ideal character? It's wishful thinking in the age of Kali. But it doesn't change the principle. So Prabhupada is advocating principle. He would stick by it. So that's it for this morning's session. Prabhupada very clearly preferred the Vedic system. When you have to have the Vedic system, you have to have qualified brahmanas for starters. So that's where his focus went, qualified brahmanas. And in many cases, he met with administrators and he acted as the brahmana for the administrators. One very outstanding example that I've heard many times, Prabhupada was in Sweden and he was meeting with an ambassador, Indian man, ambassador from India to Sweden. And Prabhupada, there was some small talk at the beginning. But quickly, Prabhupada got to the point he wanted to make, and it's saying the government should not be afraid to ensure that the Brahmanas in all religious traditions are following their Brahminical culture. And the man saying, well, India is a secular state and we can't do that. Prabhupada said, yes, you can. You don't have to have people who are that ism become part of this ism, but those who are Muslim, they follow their teachings. Those who are Christian follow their teachings. Those who are Vaishnavas follow their teachings. And it's the duty of the government. So, that didn't get very far because the man was saying, oh, it's unpopular. There's the secular state. There's non-involvement of state in religion. That was his position. That's democracy. The reason that democracy, just a little history that I learned from Sadhaputta and Rabindra that studied European history and spoke about it regularly. Part of the corruption of monarchy was the hand-in-glove situation with the church. And therefore, the axiom, separation of church and state. Because one becomes corrupt and the other becomes corrupt. So separation of church and state. Prabhupada is saying separation of church and state is one thing, but the state should see that the Brahmanas are doing the duties of a Brahmana. Whatever their tradition is, they're doing the duties of a Brahmana according to their tradition. Because there's oversight by the Kshatriyas for the Brahmanas, but the Brahmanas are to be qualified and guide the Kshatriyas. So there's this proper relationship to keep things, going in the proper direction. What was Prabhupada's point? Now the point here is ambitious persons don't like a qualified person because it means that if I'm not qualified, I'm not going to be the leader. So they don't like the qualified leader model. They want to have elections. And it just deteriorates over time. Prabhupada's statement is that communism is the byproduct of the failure of democracy. But then his point here is there's more abuse over there than even, the qualified king. So how do you get qualified kings today? It starts with qualified brahmanas. Once a reporter asked Prabhupada, Swamiji, your movement is growing so fast. Maybe you'll be elected the president. Prabhupada laughed and said, I have no interest in becoming the president. Then he paused. I can advise the president. His ambition was not control. His ambition was the Vedic model. And strongly and clearly, and here's 1962 with people that don't know anything about Varnashram, and they may also not like monarchy. Who knows? Maybe the imperial country of Japan may have liked at least a powerful leader, but the powerful leader should be trained. And he's presenting principles. Let's see how the audience would have liked it. And then there's the world. Fearless. I checked again on the history. In 1963, when this book was not published, It wasn't that he spoke at the Aurobindo ashram, but he submitted an article which they published. It was a 2-part article, and they published it in their publication. Exactly, unedited, Prabhupada, unvarnished Prabhupada's strong message to their audience. But the same, cut and paste for that audience. So let's see if there's some discussion. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. This is with reference to chapter 42, where Prabhupada discussed about the service in the mood of separation. It's just a comment that we do realize, like after the Vrindavan Yatra, when I came back, I would get a lot of sort of dreams about the different deities that we have seen. And kind of a longingness, like I would get up in the morning, like crying, like why we have come back from the dam. At the same time, this is my personal experience where I felt if we don't have Krishna at the center in any of the relationships, we don't have that kind of a longingness or sort of, we don't feel that mood of separation in that relationship. That's something like I personally felt.
You're fortunate. I know some devotees that are still in Vrindavan from the yatra. That what's going on in Vrindavan, it ends, I think, tomorrow, is right after, as we were finishing, they started their japa retreat at the Govardhan retreat center. And when that completed, then they have their Govardhan retreat that's not focused on japa. And it's still going on. And they're hearing pastimes of Krishna every day, like, morning and night, morning and afternoon and night. So those devotees are getting a lot of mercy. And I'm sure, similarly, a deeper attachment for Vrindavan Dham. But one devotee who's there, they're not only speaking about, they're not like only Vrindavan Katha, only Krishna in Vrindavan Katha. There was a whole discussion just yesterday on kings that Jarasandha had imprisoned. And when Jarasandha was killed, then they were released, how their prayers to Krishna. So details and details. So my point is just becoming, Krishna is the object of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th canto in particular, but even starting in the first canto and throughout, the mention of Krishna's very special position. So hearing is our method of becoming attached to the object, the unseen object. And as we hear more and hear more and hear more, the attachment and eagerness to see Krishna or see his deity form or hear further, it grows and grows. The uncovering of that natural attraction for Krishna is the byproduct of, as we're doing, hearing. And what Prabhupada is doing with his audience here. They don't know Krishna, but they're hearing about Krishna from one who loves Krishna. So thank you for that sharing. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
I'm also have some thoughts over this sorrow that gopis felt over Krishna. Three thoughts. First, it is described in the verse that the gopis are overtaken by heartfelt sorrow. This is certainly heartfelt, and it's also a pleasant sorrow. A pleasant sorrow, and
Explain. I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just asking you to expand on what's a pleasant sorrow. It sounds like a contradiction.
Okay, let me give you an example. Like in this emotion is probably at least part of people from the Orient, they can greatly echo such this emotion. It's like there is this lamentation over the transient nature of everything that is beautiful in the world. And so, for instance, of course, people will appreciate the full blossom of beautiful flowers. And at the same time, they will even savor more over a fading that the beauty has already passed from, like the flowers fading, falling on the ground. And that's the first thought.
That's nice. That's a nice example. That's a nice example. It takes, a comment is it takes a heart that has a, I don't know, maybe the right word, poetic sense or affective sense, that something, as something beautiful, like a flower or whatever it is, the spring season changes and it becomes summer, and summer season changes and it becomes fall. And the fall season changes and it becomes winter, you know, in our place where there's 4 seasons. So there's beauty in that change. It takes a poetic sense to appreciate the change. I'm just responding. Go ahead.
So we're going to the next.
Yes, yes.
So, I think this is when gopis are in separation from Krishna, they internalize Krishna by always thinking about his words and feelings,
Yes.
and this loving, playful attitude towards them. And so in this way, they actually are with Krishna
Yes.
always.
Yes.
And also, in their life, the presence of Krishna is felt even more strongly.
Yes.
And this is relatable for us in our service to spiritual master.
As long as, a comment on that one, as long as there's renewed investment in the relationship, meaning just like reading Prabhupada's books regularly, hearing his recorded lectures regularly, it renews and reinvigorates, just like what we're doing here with this Light of the Bhagavad. it renews, it rejuvenates a sense of appreciation for our founder Acharya. And then how can I be in service to his mission more than if we don't hear his words and a description of his teachings? So there's renewal of that relationship that makes the sense of separation enhanced. Otherwise, you can just fade like a memory. The memory doesn't go away, but it can fade. So it needs to be renewed by regular reading and hearing and committing to his mission. I wanted to say something. In the course of this time together, one of the things that I'm learning is how to help myself and others get the most from our time together. And one of the things, along with these breakout sessions we're having, it wasn't the initial plan, but it came up as we went along, and I think it's very valuable. So one of the things I'm going to be asking here and in the subsequent audiences, I'm going to speak this same topic, is other than the people who are here with us, which is like what the breakout group is doing, sharing what your experience is and your understanding and realization and application and things, people that aren't here, take the message that resonated and was meaningful and touched your heart, and share it with another, at least one other person, and see what happens when you do that. The appreciation will spike, and the what you have felt while being here will not only be remembered, revived, but it'll increase. And that's our method, the Sankirtan method. We hear, we receive, we share what we've heard. And then that's going to help move our heart even more and bring the remembrance and attachment to the object, Krishna and our founder Acharya, even more, the Bhagavatam. Okay, that's my comment on what you just shared. Now, one more?
One more. So I think that the last point is, I think does how gopis are heartfeltly sorrowful in the absence of Krishna is proportionate to how deeply they love Krishna.
Yes.
Yes. I think one feature of love is that the more deeply you love somebody, the more distance you feel. And so it means that the more separation you feel, and then you want to come even closer. And so it's like an endless paradoxical circle that enhance love.
What you just shared, I was thinking about my exchanges with Hari Sori. By name, you probably know who is Hari Sori, Prabhupada disciple who for the longest time of anyone else was Prabhupada's personal servant. And it came and went a couple of times, but he was intimately serving Prabhupada. And I happened to ask Hari Sori a question about his health, because I heard that he had like a kind of a serious health challenge. Asked him, how's it going? And he started giving an answer that was pretty simple. but I just hit his Prabhupada service button. And then he just completely went away from his health and started speaking about Prabhupada's health. And I'll just share with some of the things that he said. He said something that I didn't know before. He told me. He said the reason that was one of the services that he did every day was he had a massage of Srila Prabhupada. Now, Prabhupada wasn't a sense gratifier. I want a massage. It was health. The health was, I learned from him, he had half a kidney. Normally there's two kidneys. One of them wasn't working at all, and the other one was half. And what happens when the kidney doesn't work is toxins that are normally eliminated through the work of the kidney wasn't happening. So toxins are building up in his body, in the tissues of his body. And so he needed massage to release those toxins that were very painful in his body. And he said and for that reason, Prabhupada was very particular of wanting the massage to be very hard, because it wasn't just like pat, it was releasing toxins from his body. Then he paused and said, only on two, so Prabhupada was always in pain, because I was asking, how's your health? Prabhupada was always in pain, but only on two occasions, he said to Prabhupada, stop. He was always in pain. Anyone that's had pain, you know what, it's hard. He said one time, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada rang the bell. So he paid obeisances, went quickly into Prabhupada's room to find out what he wanted. And Prabhupada was sitting there with the chadar over his head, just regular temperature, but his whole body was shaking. And he said to Hari Sori, I can't do my translation. I'm in too much pain. And he was like, he knew that Prabhupada had pain all the time, but it kind of spiked. And he just tolerated it. They said that only happened one other time. Otherwise, Prabhupada just moved right through. Then he went on and told another story. Said one time Prabhupada had an abscessed tooth. Abscess means there's an infection. And his jaw was swollen. Anyone that's had a toothache knows what that's like. So the devotees asked Prabhupada, can we take you to a dentist? Prabhupada's answered, no, just give me cloves. So cloves has a kind of like a numbing effect to the gums. So he just put some cloves by his gums and carried on. No dentist. I mean, it's not like that's what we should do, but that's what Prabhupada did. And then some days later, Prabhupada was taking prasadam. Hari Sori was there to see what else he wanted. Prabhupada reached in his mouth, pulled out the tooth, handed it and said, you can keep this, and went on with his lunch. He was transcendental to pain and transcendental to everything. He had a material body that had its whatever material bodies have, old age, disease, and death, but he just transcended everything. He wasn't an ordinary person. Anyone that's seen those videos of Prabhupada's final days, and his body is totally emaciated, and read the Bhaktivedanta purports from that last chapter, and they're so clear. You wouldn't know it otherwise. Amazing. He was transcendental. So he was transcendental in 1962. He didn't become more transcendental. He was transcendental. His expression was guided by Krishna. So that back to what led me to share that with you is, the feelings of separation are certainly in commensurate with one's attachment for the object. And Hari Sori was a nice example of how much attachment he had for Prabhupada from serving him. And then here's another appreciation. For some period of time, Shri Radha Shama Sundara ki jai. When his health was better, because he, at some point in time, one of the diseases that he had to deal with was Parkinson's. So his hand would shake. You sit and talk with him and his hand's moving like this. So it was hard for him to sit at a computer and type. But when he was presenting the Transcendental Diary, the experience of those around him was his consciousness was so clear. When some topic would come up, and not just he'd have a Prabhupada story, but in addition to that, because he was so much attached to Prabhupada, his consciousness, his intelligence was on another platform. And, extraordinary. So commensurate with one's attachment to a transcendental object, one's feeling of separation grows, but then there's also an ecstatic feeling. And greater clarity about everything. So the one thing, smartavya satatam vishnur vismartavyo najata chit. And that plays into the separation topic as well. The feelings of ecstatic sorrow grow depending upon one's attachment for the object, commensurate with. Okay, do you have 10 minutes? Anyone else?
Just a comment, Maharaj. The one statement from 42 chapter. A bona fide lover of God can never forget Krishna, even in exchange for everything else. So, two things. One was the appreciation, like you were sharing, how Prabhupada messages, statements he makes are in reference to scriptural references in many times. I may not recognize all the time, but there are scriptural references.
Yes.
So I remember reading this in the 11th canto, earlier chapters, where Uttamadhikari symptoms are described by Navayogendras to Maharaj Limi. So there also this point comes, and the purport explains 2 points. One is because they don't have any other material desires other than Krishna, number one. And number two, there's so much attachment for Krishna, Krishna's lotus feet, that they cannot give up, they cannot imagine thinking about something else, giving up Krishna for something else like that. Thank you, man.
Okay, up front here. Raise your hand.
Guruma, this is online question from Amritananda Prabhu.
Oh.
He's visiting one of our godbrother, and Rupa Manohar Prabhu is in the hospital.
Yes, he is. Good for him.
At the times while doing some seva, we feel intense emotion that seems to mimic spiritual ecstasy, like tears welling up, voice choking,
Yes.
or getting goosebumps. Is this sahajiya?
No.
How can one differentiate between sahajiya and genuine feelings within oneself?
Well, 2 things. It's in Rupa Goswami's writing where the definition of, or the term that indicates this description is Abbas, or a shadow. Bhava, Abbas, a shadow of Bhava. And that's what it is. It's not Sahajya. Sahajya is imitation of something that's genuine, and that's Sahajya. I'll give a practical example. One year, 1974, I think, during the Mayapur Vrindavan festival, after the morning program and prasadam and everything, I was sitting in the park next to the temple. And, you know, things were a little different then, but there's still a park there. And I noticed while I was sitting chanting japa in the park, there were some musicians from outside coming to the temple. And after some time, we could hear, they were, you know, good musicians, and they were having a nice kirtan. And Prabhupada was upstairs. His quarters were, so there's the ground level, then the first floor, and then the second floor. So his quarters were on the second floor. He heard the kirtan because he came to the balcony, you know, right at the edge of the corridor, peered over because he couldn't see because they were directly below him in the temple room, motioned for his servant to come. The servant came running quickly, and Prabhupada, it was clear he was unhappy. And the instruction was remove them. And he could tell by the sound of the kirtan that they were Sahajiyas. And what happened in between that, you know, three sannyasis went running down the stairs, their kirtan quickly shifted to they were rolling around in the temple room, literally, you know, wailing, and the kirtan stopped, and they were Sahajiyas, imitating ecstasy. So the sannyasis, by the time they reached down, they were rolling on the temple room floor, and they lifted them up and escorted them out. They didn't toss them, but they escorted them out. And as they were walking from the temple area back to the gate, they were smoking bidis. So that's Sahajya. It's an imitation of something genuine when there's actual attachment to something else and looking for, you know, something, recognition from others or something. That's Sahajya. So how do you know the difference? When there's genuine and consistent devotion and some emotion arises from that genuine and consistent emotion, that's Abbas. That emotion is Abbas. Bhakti Abbas or Bhava Abbas. And it's Sahajya when it's just imitation and there's attachment to something other than a life of devotion to Krishna for cheap adoration, etc. There's an example. Something else? We have 5 minutes. You have anything you want to share with us? Okay. You two I'm looking to you two for something nice. Speak directly into the microphone.
It seems to me that as early as 1962, Srila Prabhupada already had in mind for a vision of an international society.
Yes. He, in the book, mentions League of Devotees, which is something that he had previously established, but the intention of that League of Devotees had an international scope. Why international? Because that was the desire of his spiritual master, which was the desire of Bhakti Vinod, which was the desire of Lord Chaitanya. Every town and village. So he had accepted their vision and mission as his. Anything else? I'm just asking you to say something nice. You're very thoughtful. I appreciate how thoughtful you were. Publicly, I appreciate how thoughtful you are. Go ahead, say something nice. Thoughtful. Say something unpleasant if you want. Huh? Okay. Okay, we'll end there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.